Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. As we continue to break down some Kaneki's transformations, in this video, I'll be covering Haise's transformation into the Black Reaper Kaneki. With that being said, I hope you all enjoy this breakdown, and if you haven't seen the previous two, be sure to check those out. At this point of the story, Haise is getting closer and closer to remembering who he was, and he becomes desperate for information on Ken Kaneki. We see Haise ask a random investigator about Amon, and when he does, it's confirmed that Amon passed away during the 20th Ward operation, and then it's told to Haise that any more information on Amon's passing away is classified. This prompts Haise to ask, why is this even classified in the first place? The child Kaneki Ken appears in the Haise's head, asking, why do you want to know about Eye Patch and Amon? Haise then responds, for you. When we next see Haise, he seems to be outside at a park, and he is then approached by Tsukiyama, who has the intention of reminding Haise who he once was. Ironically enough, Haise was far ahead of him, saying that he thought he'd find him here at the park, and even made sure that he had the time to speak to him once again. This completely catches Tsukiyama off guard. As Haise chooses to skip past all the small talking BS, he straight up asks Tsukiyama if he's a ghoul, making his heart drop. Up to the point of the story, Haise has always been quite reserved and modest when it came to people keeping his identity or other things hidden from him. So Haise choosing to do something like this easily displays to the viewer that he's fed up with the lies, and now he's going to take the initiative. You can only live within a lie so long before it caves in on itself. As Haise continues to speak, he apologizes for such an abrupt question, explaining to Tsukiyama that he's had many unusual encounters recently, so he rephrases the question in a way that can help him gain more information on himself, asking if Tsukiyama is aware of Uta, Hinami, or Yotsume, then telling Tsukiyama that he doesn't even need to answer that either. As Tsukiyama becomes overwhelmed with the questions, he asks what is Kaneki even trying to do here, and he gets his answer. Kaneki then narrows all the questions down to his mind and finally asks, did you know Kaneki? Now that Tsukiyama is presented with the opportunity he was first seeking, he fails to take it, so Haise proceeds to speak. He states that he's not here as investigator Sasaki, but as Haise Sasaki. He's been avoiding finding out who he was for so long, and now he needs to come to terms with his past self. As the missing 20 years of his past life plagues him, he knows that finding these answers will offer him relief, and allowing the child Kaneki to disappear from his mind will do nothing but hurt him even more. As Tsukiyama hears this, he's unable to make a decision. He's unable to know if revealing Kaneki's past to him will do more harm or good. Tsukiyama decides to inform Haise that the changes that finding out who he once was may force him to give up the life that he has now. When Haise has to contemplate this, he cries and says no, going on to explain that when the ghouls saw him with his mask, they called him the Eye Patch, piecing together that this was most likely what he was known for in the past. Even with this body, I want to remain a person. Ken Kaneki was a ghoul feared even by other ghouls. I don't want to accept him. I want this life to continue, but somewhere inside of me, I know it can't. Someday I'll have to accept who I was. It's not logic or emotion, it's more like fate. Something that remains consistent about Kaneki and all of his personalities is that he will always make the hardest decisions, no matter what. He understands that, here, he must find out his truth. Although it'd break his heart to lose the life that he currently has, to wake up from this dream, he understands that the return of Kaneki is inevitable, so it's a risk that he must take. Haise pleads for Tsukiyama to tell him anything about himself, and Tsukiyama, understanding Kaneki very well, pieces together that Haise is an amalgamation of both of the Kanekis he once knew. He points out that Haise both has a strong and weak side, and the Haise he's speaking to currently is the weak side of himself. The Kaneki who once was not strong enough to make a choice. This reminder of the Kanekis he once knew, and the chance to get one of them back, causes Tsukiyama to really think about what Kaneki is to him. He claimed that Kaneki was no more than an ingredient, a delicacy, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Upon reminding him of the times he once spent with Kaneki, Banjo, and Hinami, he states that those times were truly fun for him. With Haise catching him off guard and his epiphany about Kaneki just now, he's unsure of what to do. He walks away and says that he's no longer sure of himself, leaving Haise disturbed. The next time we see Haise, he's researching past case files, and Akira checks in to ask why he's not preparing for the Tsukiyama raid. Haise informs her as to what he's doing currently, and takes the opportunity to ask her about her time being assigned to the 20th Ward. With her well-known intuition, she instantly picks up that he's going to ask about Amon. She quickly tells Haise that he was just a colleague and died in the owl operation, nothing more. Haise isn't satisfied with this answer though, as he knows that there's clearly more than what she's telling him, but he still asks about the eye patch, to which she responds by telling him that there's nothing he needs to know. As Akira begins to walk away, she tells him to get back to preparing for the operation, but he asks, "Why is it none of my business?" Akira tells him to not make her repeat herself, but he cuts her off by screaming, "Why won't you tell me?" He asks if it's because he's eye patch, because he's the one who killed Amon. Expressing the fear of waking up and not knowing anything, only having what he's been told to cling on to, having no idea who his real parents are, having no idea where he came from or who he even is. All of these things weighing on Haise's mind forces him to break down and begin crying, which makes Akira hug and hold him, telling him that he is who he is and names do not matter. Something to remember is that Amon is a touchy subject, not only for Haise, but Akira herself. As Amon was the protege of her father and a person that she loved, she likely harbors a little bit of resentment in Haise due to this, but still has to recognize that it's not his fault. And with that, we enter the Tsukiyama raid. We see a bridge in the middle of the night, and on this bridge is a car that contains Tsukiyama and his maid Matsume. As Tsukiyama is asleep in the car, Matsume reports to someone that they're headed to the 8th ward, and this makes Tsukiyama wake up and ask where they're going. Matsume lies to him and says that Tsukiyama's father arranged for Tsukiyama to go on a drive since he looked tired, but Tsukiyama sees right through this, asking where his father was. Matsume states that his father stood behind and that their societal influence is completely gone. Matsume then tells Tsukiyama that his father will do his best to distract the CCG until they're clear, and Tsukiyama says, "So we can escape?" This instantly reminds Tsukiyama of the Anteku raid that took place at the ending of the previous series. Tsukiyama then yells at Matsume and tells her that they need to turn back, but Matsume retorts by saying that the Tsukiyama family has come to an end, and that Tsukiyama must stay alive for the future of the family. If you care for each and every one of us, please do not let our wishes be in vain. Tsukiyama then thinks to himself that he turns back to save his father, then everybody there will die for nothing. This thought reminds him of Kaneki, as he's now in Kaneki's shoes. When he once tried to stop him 2 years ago, he absolutely understands, and says that no wonder he couldn't be stopped. We come back to Haise during the raid, and he's told by Kuri to investigate the rooftop in order to know if there are hostiles there. He instantly gets on it, using his Kagane to climb up the building with relative ease. As he arrives at the rooftop, he looks over the city of Tokyo and thinks to himself, even a corporation, when it ends abruptly. This thought forces a sting to go through his mind, this being a callback to his conversation with Nishio before he decided to enter the Anteku raid. It forces his head to sting since these are his memories coming through, although he's not aware of it. As we move on to Tsukiyama returning home with Matsume, she asks him to stay where they're currently at while she goes on to invite the investigators. But he asks, "Why aren't you wearing your mask?" He asks her to swear to him that she'll return, but she tells him that she cannot promise that, and asks him to please survive for her sake. He simply says, that isn't fair. Some time passes and Tsukiyama is going on to the roof of the building, and he comes across Haise. At the sight of him, he can't do anything but think to himself, are you freaking kidding me? What a ridiculous comedy. Kuri calls to check in on Haise, and Haise says that there's no sign of Tsukiyama yet. Kuri then tells Haise to just keep watch up there, to which Haise affirms. Tsukiyama asks Haise if that false report is supposed to be pity, and then Haise states that he's obligated to fight him, but he wanted to talk before then. Tsukiyama asks Haise what he wants to know, and does he want him to talk about Kaneki before he's killed off like the rest of his people? Haise asks Tsukiyama to stand down, and if he does, he can advise the CCG to take charge of him. But Tsukiyama refuses. Bolting toward Haise with a thunderous kick, he sends him flying. He claims that many have sacrificed themselves for him, and turning himself in to wait around in the detention center until he's disposed of is something he cannot do. From here on out, he'll be fighting to survive, and to make Haise aware of this, Tsukiyama makes sure to let him know that he does not care for him. As the two fight, Haise questions Tsukiyama's decision to fight rather than surrender, laying out his circumstances of being surrounded by the CCG and his guards being eradicated. How could you see yourself making it out of this raid alive? Haise tells Tsukiyama that all of this is just unreasonable, which again is another parallel to the Anteku raid, as this is what Tsukiyama was literally telling Kaneki when he attempted to convince him to stay. Tsukiyama responds to Haise by simply saying that it's none of his concern. As he thinks of Haise in his mind, he apologizes for turning his life into shambles when Haise really could have been at peace. He says that it's sad that their lives will no longer intersect after this battle, and sends Haise flying with a blow. As Haise is being relentlessly attacked by Tsukiyama, he begins to read his moves like a book, leading all the way up to Tsukiyama doing a huge swing on Haise's shoulder. As this attack lands, Tsukiyama also realizes that Haise is able to read his moves, and then the scene cuts to Haise having Tsukiyama pinned on the ground and defeated. As Haise can end the battle, Tsukiyama says that he's still strong. This causes Haise's head to ring once more, and the child Kaneki begs Haise for him to not kill Tsukiyama, and by proxy, him. If Haise deals his finishing blow, he'll most likely betray himself and lose Kaneki. Haise struggles to make the decision, but he takes too much time, and this indecision will cost him dearly. As Haise's hand has been cut off by one of Tsukiyama's servants, one who seems to have been mutated by the one-eyed owl herself, he screams at the top of his lungs. As Haise's bellows of agony ring throughout the night, Kanae tells him to shut up and throws his arm off the building, calling it garbage. Haise stumbles and falls onto the ground, and Tsukiyama asks if this is Kanae, to which she says it is. She instantly attacks Haise once more, sending him flying into the building, and asks Tsukiyama to please wait while she takes out the trash. Some time passes and we see Haise beaten to a pulp, and Kanae begins to say to Haise, "Do you know why a rose is beautiful? Because it's plucked before it withers. You'll go down as a beautiful memory for Tsukiyama. Die." Haise simply responds by rotating his body and putting his left leg on Kanae's neck, and sends off a devastating kick with his left leg, sending Kanae's head flying. It's then shown what was going through Haise's head when he was being held by Kanae, a hallucination of Arima, telling him that he must do his job by any means, or would you prefer to die again? This triggers Haise and forces him to respond by going into a feral state and sending Kanae's head flying with ease. As he regains consciousness and lands, he begins to ramble. "It's mine, my body, my eyes, my arms, my eyes, my soul." And meanwhile Haise's doing that, Kanae's head reattaches itself, and she regains her own consciousness as well. She questions his ability to regenerate so well, that she's even able to recover from her head being blown off, but redirects her attention towards Haise. As Haise begins to shift the tides of this battle, she points out that he seems to be a different person than before, and how dare he take Tsukiyama away from her, and his Kagune pierces her torso. As we go into a flashback, it's quickly revealed that Tsukiyama's unaware that Kanae is a woman, and the cause of her mutation is from Eto, the one-eyed owl. She underwent her mutation and is fighting Haise currently because she's in love with Tsukiyama and wants to keep him safe from Haise and the CCG. As Haise sends her flying into a wall, he corners her, preparing to finish her off for good. Kanae then says that she'll kill Haise and go home with Tsukiyama, meanwhile thinking about Eve, the first woman who ate the apple from the tree of knowledge in order to love a man. She asked, "Did I want to be loved? Of course I did." Tsukiyama tells Kanae to stand back, and Haise stares at her, and he thinks to himself, "For some strange reason, I felt an indescribable sadness. I remembered a certain passage," and then he says out loud, "My sweet apathetic soul." This summons Eto, the one-eyed owl herself, and she lands right in front of Haise, completely manifesting her Kakuja and instantly attacking him. As Haise is sent flying, Eto begins to yell out both of his names, Kaneki and Haise, and she then says, "Arima would have been able to dodge that flick to the forehead, Haise, or do you enjoy getting hit in the first place?" This alludes to something that we'll be seeing fairly soon. And as she redirects her attention towards Kanae, Eto tells her to get back up and dance for her, as she'll be dying soon anyway. Kanae gets back up and ragdolls Haise, sending him flying with a sidekick and then lands an axe kick, propelling him to the ground. As Haise is completely overwhelmed from the damage he's taken from Eto and now Kanae, he stops responding. Kanae stomps on his head repeatedly, shouting, "I will be loved," and we fade into Haise's mind. Haise says that his head is cracked open, It tastes like honey in my mouth. Haise begins to hallucinate, and the child Kaneki looks over him. He says that he's a baby suffocating inside of a bottle, and asks, "Weren't you going to save me?" Haise then grabs the child with no hesitation, and tells him to shut up, telling him to die, and he speaks about his salvation. That night, he should have died against Arima. Kaneki then tells him, "There you go." It's then said to Haise, "Don't you remember? It was just a little pleading. I used to get spanked all the time by someone I loved." And it's shown that Kaneki was abused as a child when he'd asked for almost anything, which explains his reserved and introverted nature, and also the lack of initiative. All parts of Kaneki that Arima himself was able to notice when they first met. As Kaneki continues going through his past to help Haise remember, he explains that he was happy back then, and that he finally got to meet the Reaper that night. Like the little insect mom was, "I was going to, but I couldn't." Haise asks Kaneki to clarify if he wanted to pass away, and Kaneki confirms it. And this time around, he wants to go out in a way that'll make everybody love him. He wants to pass away heroically, and ironically enough, this need to pass away heroically has done nothing but cause him to fail. But due to how he skewed his vision of his mother, who Kaneki believes passed away in this same sacrificial nature, and how he loved her despite the abuse, he cannot help but trudge down the same path. He can't help but romanticize failing in this way. Haise now understands his nature and who Kaneki was. As Kaneki makes his salvation clear to Haise, he calls himself no more than a pleasant dream. Haise states that obtaining the salvation of this child Kaneki doesn't sound so hard, and as Kaneki asks Haise if he'd be able to do this, he says yes. What the child Kaneki is truly asking Haise here is if Haise truly does want to remember everything, because if he does, his desire to go back to his original plan will return, and this desire is to die heroically. The truth behind Haise is that, although he was the most emotionally stable version of Kaneki, and even being an outgoing and well-liked person who served a great purpose in society, he always knew that it was going to end sooner or later. Haise was a lie that gave Kaneki everything he asked for. This lie was something that could be stolen away from him at any moment, and that likely played a role in Haise never reaching true happiness as an investigator. The desperate lie that is the existence of Haise that resembles bargaining has finally resulted in Kaneki reobtaining his memory. Wake up, cry a little, and it's over. Haise prepares himself to remember his memories, feel all the pain that will come with them, and to die heroically in order to end said pain. The dream ends and the truth returns, and Kaneki's depression sets in. As we enter the real world once more, we see Kanae still attacking Kaneki, but it's seamlessly interrupted with a flash of his Kagune. This attack sends Kanae's arm flying into the air. This arm is caught by none other than the spectator, Eto. As Kanae falls to the ground, Kaneki walks towards her and grabs her hair, meanwhile having his Kagune grab a steel pole. And once he looks at her again, he tells her to shut up. He runs the steel pole through her eyes with his Kagune, this forcing her to mentally break down from the immense pain. Kanae unleashes her Kagune in a frenzy, and Kaneki lands on it the second she finishes attacking. This allows Kaneki to utilize the Kagune returning into her body as a vehicle to slip behind her. As they're now back to back, Kaneki grabs her with his Kagune, and forces even more to propel through her body, ending the battle. As Kaneki's back, he walks towards Tsukiyama and looks down at him, and Tsukiyama asks if that's really Kaneki. As Kaneki's contemplating what to do here, he remembers Nico once telling him that Eto may be the one-eyed king. Understanding what this means, Kaneki confirms to Tsukiyama that it's indeed him, and he proceeds to knock Tsukiyama out. This was most likely because when Tsukiyama and Kaneki were once friends in the past, their goal was to find and defeat the one-eyed king. But Kaneki obviously wouldn't want Tsukiyama to get in this battle with him if he were to find out that Eto was the one-eyed king as well, so he gets rid of him and knocks him out. After this, Kaneki points his attention towards Eto, and she says he's finally awakened. "I wonder who's stronger, you or Arima Kisha?" Kaneki simply responds with, "You're pathetic." They now clash. As Kaneki dodges all of Eto's spears, he asks for her purpose behind her intrusion, narrowing it down to if she's only killing time, and she confirms this, stating that she was wondering how the situation on the rooftop would play out. Kaneki tells her that her father wanted him to save her, and she responds to him by saying that she's already been saved. She mocks Kaneki by saying that He's so kind and asking if he's really going to take pity on her. And he says that he will. And after this, he cuts open Eto's kakuja. The pity that Kaneki will bestow upon her may not be the one she had in mind. As Kaneki lands on a steel beam above her, he says, "Let me ask you one thing. Why should I save trash like you?" And this pisses Eto off to no end. As she expresses her frustration with Kaneki for that attack he landed on her, she begins to mutate her kakuja even further, beginning to repeatedly yell for him to come here while chasing him. She shoots 2 attacks at Kaneki, which he dodges with ease. She begins to yell that her head's all fizzy, and she repeats her own stories that she's written as she transforms herself even more. And as she screams, it's the outpouring of something beautiful. Launching more attacks at Kaneki, he hops over them and jumps off of the building they're fighting on, reattaching himself to the side of the building by using his Kagune, but Eto's still on his trail. Kaneki uses his Kagune to keep himself stable as he's running alongside the building, and eventually he jumps onto another building. He then jumps once more, barely avoiding Eto's attack. He lands onto another set of steel beams, and as Eto says, "Let's end one another," she goes in for one more attack. This is completely countered by Kaneki. In a bleak representation of what Kaneki has become, he rips Eto apart mercilessly. And as he ends the entire fight in one blow, he finishes off Eto by cutting her in half and throwing her off of the building. The 2 one-eyed children who were abandoned by their parents conclude their battle. With Eto recognizing her similarities to Kaneki, she says that she likes him. The Black Reaper has been fully realized, and he tells Eto that he's honored. Some time passes and we see Kurui finally reach the rooftop, and he says he hears something. We then see Kaneki devouring Eto, and Kurui asks Kaneki what the hell he's doing. Kaneki says that he was exhausted from fighting the one-eyed owl and felt the need to replenish himself. And Kurui asks if he was able to at least exterminate it, and Kaneki says no, it got away at the last second. Kaneki and Kurui walk up to Tsukiyama, and Kaneki tells Kurui to run down on what happened on the rooftop with him, but he adds that the Tsukiyama family and the Aogiri tree are connected, which is to deceive both Kurui and Tsukiyama. Kaneki also points out that Kanae was also part of the family. He takes the initiative and tells Kurui that he will be handling the extermination of Tsukiyama, and Kurui then states that he'll handle the other. Kaneki grabs Tsukiyama and holds him over the rooftop, then shifts a slight gaze towards Kanae. He then throws him off, and Kanae screams for Tsukiyama upon seeing him thrown off of the building, and run past both Kaneki and Kurui to jump off and save him. We see Kaneki look down one last time and say goodbye, Tsukiyama. I need to go. As we come back to Tsukiyama's point of view, he sees Kanae chasing after him, and he tells her to save herself. She confesses her love for him as they're falling from the sky, and Tsukiyama accepts it. Feeling complete satisfaction through this, she sacrifices herself to save Tsukiyama from the fall, passing away due to injury, yet feeling no regret. The Tsukiyama raid finally concludes, and Haise stumbles upon his team and finds Uri waiting for him. Uri expresses frustration with Haise, and he tells him that Shirazu wanted to see him. If he'd gotten back sooner, he would have been able to save him. It's my fault, but who was fighting alongside him? All of the disadvantages in this world are due to incompetence. If you want to curse something, curse your own weakness. Kaneki walks past him and goes to Shirazu's body to mourn his death. They both hang their heads down in failure. That's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. This video in particular took the most out of me that any video ever has. And honestly, I don't know why. I really don't. But yeah. Probably a video on Amon coming next for Tokyo Ghoul. No big Kaneki projects yet. And especially because I know that the next one with Arima versus Kaneki last time, that's probably gonna be the longest video I ever make. So that will take time. So I'm gonna jump to Amon. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. Amon's very underrated and he deserves it. So yeah. Have a great day, guys. Peace out. And I'll see you all in the next one.